Wow, it feels great to be here. It's a great honor. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm already inspired by the people talking before me. During the streamed talk, I came to think that I've always been kind of proud that the company I run has a 50-50 gender policy everywhere, and it hasn't been a problem at all. On the contrary, quite easy, even though we work with technology. So in the organization, 3 offices, management, board of directors, always 50-50. Until recently, when I realized that right now, everybody working in management in my company is a woman. They're all hired because of their skill set, so it shouldn't be a problem, but I see it slightly as a problem. We're going to have to deal with that. Someone straighten things out. Anyways, glad to be here. Right now, I'm a little bit scared. And I'm scared because if somebody would have asked me before, would you like to speak in a TEDx context? I would have said, yes, that sounds great. What would you like to talk about? Well, maybe digital consumption, why that's important, or how we could use these new possibilities to build a sustainable world, like Sam picked up. That would have been topics that I know something about, that I'm comfortable with. But then when I researched and prepared for this on the theme of creative empowerment, I ended up finding myself thinking about other things, where I have to say, I'm probably not an authority, so that's scary. But I also realized that there are things that I feel very strongly about. So I'm going to talk to you about this. What's my best empowerment strategy? So let me start by telling you a little bit about myself and where I come from. So this is me and my dad when I was 3 or 4 or something like that. And he's pretty much the reason, well, obviously why I exist. He's also the reason why I work with digital, and I'm intensely grateful for that. Because working with digital in a time when the world has gotten a new dimension, a digital dimension, is just incredibly exciting. He also taught me a lot of things that I think have been empowering to me. So here are a few things that he told me as a kid. When I was 8 years old, I came to a new school. I didn't have any friends, and I was like, how am I going to make friends? And he said, go play soccer. I'm not so sure that I'm welcome. Well, you shouldn't ask. Just play. That's going to work out fine. It actually worked quite a few times. He also had a kind of a special view and authority, including his own authority, where he told me, listen, if you want to do something and you ask permission, people will be quite inclined to say no. So just think twice before you ask permission to do something. Well, naturally, he was kind of expecting me not to do illegal stuff or dangerous stuff or idiotic things. But as long as I was doing something that I would believe in, he would just encourage me to not invite people like, would you like to share this risk with me? Just do it. Then when I started trying things out, I would run to him and complain when things turned out to be difficult, and I thought that I couldn't do it. And he said, look, this is only difficult because you're deciding that it should be difficult. It has to do with your mindset. So this was very true in a lot of things. I studied tons of math, for instance, even though I didn't particularly like it, just because I realized that it's not that difficult, actually. So this how difficult can it be attitude has helped me a lot. Perhaps the wisest thing he told me was, make sure you do fun things first, because there's always time for the boring stuff later. This was a very bad strategy in terms of having an orderly home, as it turned out, and that might have been why I didn't agree with him for a very, very long time. So I would say I probably lived about 35 years of my life thinking he was wrong about that, and now, a couple of years later, I'm starting to think that just might have been the wisest thing he ever told me. That's not what I'm talking about primarily today, but I think it's very good advice. Obviously, everything he taught me was not empowering and great and inspirational. One thing that I was also taught as a child was to be very cautious about what kind of emotions do I show people. Actually, in fact, even what kind of emotions do I allow myself to feel. Typically, if I wouldn't get my way with something, I would get angry, right? I think most of you also did as children. I think we also do as adults. But what happened was, as soon as I showed my anger and kind of raised my voice or lived it out, I would be told to go to my room, come back when I could behave like a normal person. So Well, that taught me a lot of things. It taught me to keep my head cool. It taught me to be quite good at argumentation and get my way that way. But it did not teach me to be very good at feeling anger. Now, I'm a pretty typical Swede, as it turns out, when I start reading up on how do we raise children. In this culture, there are these pretty old social contracts that have shaped my parents and shaped their parents in turn. So we have a social contract here that has influenced many of us that has to do with do not show negative emotions and preferably maybe avoid them altogether. So what we're teaching children is angry children, we're trying to calm them down. Sad kids are comforted, ooh, don't be sad. And children who are afraid are reasoned, you don't need to be afraid of that, etc. So since I now raise 3 children, this has become a sort of important thing to me to think about, is this a healthy thing? And as it turns out, it isn't. Because psychology came a pretty long way since these social contracts were established in our culture. And we now know that as human beings, we are better off psychologically if we're allowed to express not only what we think, but also what we feel. And if we're allowed to fight for what we want and mourn when we don't get it, because obviously we don't always get what we want, being allowed to feel that sadness is very healthy for us. So those are some principles that I'm trying to use raising my children. But these are also insights that when I reflect upon it, I realize have helped me in my business life. So for instance, one example that kind of made a big impression on me, that was back in 2002. I had my first real design lead assignment, I would say. I was supposed to design the emergency alarm system for the Swedish state, keeping track of what to ask when people dial 911, or where the ambulances are, or where all the fire trucks are, etc. And that was a daunting task, and I was 26 years old. I was in a context filled with people 20 to 30 years my senior, with huge amounts of experience. I mean, the stuff that these guys had seen, with people dying and real fear and important management decisions, stuff like that. Well, I realized I was inexperienced, even within my field. I had a huge lack of life experience compared to them, etc. I was simply a really small dog in this context. And it scared me a bit. I mean, honestly, these guys were like big and hairy and scary. And still I wanted us to accomplish something. So what I did is that I entered this context and I told them, look, I'm pretty scared now. I'm younger than you are. I haven't got all this experience that you do. And still I feel like I have some superpower. I have skills that could actually be valuable here, but you have to help me. And that was the start of a fantastic creative collaboration in an environment where we had vastly different experiences and background. These guys were not designers. They were fire truck riders and whatever. We had a great collaboration together where we were very clear on when we agreed and when we didn't agree. We even argued pretty loudly about certain things. And I believe that being this open had given me a space where I could be more pushy with what I actually believed in, but also getting really good feedback on the stuff that they didn't trust or believe in. I think if I wouldn't have been this open, some of them would probably have thought, she's a little girl, I can't really tell her how bad I think this idea is because I'm going to hurt her feelings. I'm going to have to deal with this some other way. I think also some people would probably have resented me a bit because I tend to talk a lot and take a lot of space, and she's like, she doesn't know anything. I cannot handle the situation by talking to her. I think that we got rid of a lot of that stuff and just had this experience together. At the end of the thing that really was heartwarming was that the head of this team from their organization, he retired at the end of the project. And he had like 10 teacups that he gave away to people at the end of his career. And I got one of these teacups. And I'm still very moved when I feel it. So that for me was a sign that they had also felt something special when we did this together. So after 2002, I've been in a lot of different collaborative contexts. They're not always that creative. They're not always that empowering, generous, clear in communication. And I've thought a little bit about Why? What's the difference? When does this happen, that we have this kind of speed of thought and creativity, and when do we not? And there are like tons of tools for bringing out creativity. But one thing I noticed is that, and this sounds kind of harsh, pretty often I'm in a business context when things feel a lot different. So let me take 2 examples. I spend quite a lot of my time in different types of steering committees. Senior, competent, smart people put in a room to make decisions that will influence an entire organization, to make important priorities. What happens? Endless amounts of time spent on discussing details that just frustrate everybody. You know, slow processes on getting somewhere in what we should be dealing with. And the energy level in these rooms sometimes is low. I don't think anybody here or there at certain points are having a great time. They don't want to be there. It's not fun. What we're doing together doesn't really feel the way it should be. And I started thinking about, so what's going on in this room that we're not talking about? Well, quite often, there's this person who feels scared of losing power because of the decisions we're making right now. There's another person worried of losing face because maybe there's a history, something else happened, and that person is afraid of that being kind of the topic of discussion. That would be scary and hurt. And in the other side of the room, there might be a person who is resentful towards the others because of some historic fight that they had when things didn't turn out the way that person happened. All of these things are really influencing the mood, the discussion, the focus of discussion, and the speed in which we can act. But they're not talking about that, because that would be, I don't know, unprofessional. Talking about feeling scared or angry or whatever is not what we do at the office. Why is that? I think it has to do with this. I think it has to do with the fact that we describe business as fight, war, competition. The words we use to describe these things have all to do with that. A general idea that somebody will win and somebody else will lose. What happens with us in an environment where that's kind of the basic context? Well, I think what happens is that when we focus on our own success over individual or organizational success over others, we're also making ourselves afraid of failure. Even if we're not thinking about it, even if we're not talking about it, that's something that happens. I also think that when we start perceiving other human beings, people, as competitors rather than people to collaborate with, it scares us of being open, showing our vulnerability, our concerns, stuff like that. And all of this, because psychologists have already proven it to us, makes us unhappier, less creative, scared, and it decreases the total constructive impact that we can have together. It slows us down. It's not only me saying that. So I found this really interesting article doing the research for this talk because I realized that I don't really know what I'm doing. These are just experiences and some input I had when I talked to psychologists, etc. But so people doing research on neuroscience, they're building brains with neurons and setting up pretty complex learning systems where they have proved that it's quite interesting that in a group that learns to collaborate, suddenly something happens. Intelligence increases. So right now, scientists are pretty sure that collaboration, not competition, has been the primary driver behind the evolution of intelligence. How cool is that? What do we normally think about as the driving force behind evolution? What do we normally think about as the primary force of evolving, getting someplace? Competition. What is this doing with us? It's slowing us down. So I believe in a new game. I'm talking to you people as a group of entrepreneurs, creative people that I believe share pretty much the same values. And what I worry about is that when we start playing business, meaning when we start having an amount of power, managing a company or getting in a position where we actually have something to say. And I think that in 15 years, many of you will have even more power than you do today. I'm scared that many people will choose to adapt to the competition agenda. And I don't want that. So that's what I'm talking about. I think that we have a cultural choice to make that will be beneficial for all. I think that we should decide to dare to be open with what we think and what we feel and what we want to each other. Be human. And if we do that based on an agreement that we're always going to strive for win-win, we're not going to optimize for ourselves. If we do that, we know that we can be a generation that makes a huge impact. We can be the fastest, best improving generation that mankind has ever had. And let's face it, we also have some tools that others didn't. So internet is the best tool for human collaboration across time and space ever invented. Let's not use that and define it as a tool for competition. Let's just define it as a tool for collaboration, not only sharing ideas like we do here at TED, but also sharing what we really feel and what we really want, because we'll get further, make a bigger difference, and have a lot more fun doing it. Thank you.